The suspicious death of legendary actor Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy Arakawa. The couple found dead inside their Santa Fe home.
Gene Hackman's final days were stranger than anything investigators had ever walked into. And more than a year later, they are still searching for answers.
Now with new details on the investigation into the death of actor Gene Hackman, including newly released video.
One of the most famous actors in the world lay dead in his own home, and nobody noticed for 14 days. His wife had died first in another room of something so rare that most doctors never see a single case. The front door was open. The phone rang and rang in a house where no one could answer. And the deeper investigators dug, the clearer it became that the truth was worse than a crime. The discovery. The date was February 26, 2025, and the house belonged to one of the greatest actors who ever lived. Gene Hackman and his wife, classical pianist Betsy Arakawa, had spent decades behind the walls of that gated community in the hills above Santa Fe, New Mexico. The kind of neighborhood where the houses sit far apart and privacy is the entire point. The call to emergency dispatch that afternoon was frantic and confused. The caller could see someone down inside the house, but he could not get in, and he could not tell who it was or how long they had been there. When deputies from the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office arrived, they found the front door ajar, not broken, not forced, just open, as if someone had stepped out for a moment and never come back. Inside, the scene stopped being routine very quickly. Near the kitchen, in a mudroom at the back of the house, they found Gene Hackman on the floor. He was 95 years old. His cane was beside him, and a pair of sunglasses lay near his body, the small details of a man who appeared to have fallen mid-step, on his way somewhere he never reached. On the other side of the house, in a bathroom, they found Betsy Arakawa. She was 65, 3 decades younger than her husband, and by every account, the healthier of the two. Prescription pills were scattered across the countertop and onto the floor around her. A space heater lay near her head, apparently pulled down in a fall. And in a closet not far from her body, deputies opened a crate and found one of the couple's dogs inside, dead. 2 other dogs were still alive, moving through the property. One of them had stayed close to Arakawa. Then came the detail that changed everything. Both bodies showed clear signs of decomposition, and in places, the dry New Mexico air had begun to mummify the tissue. Whatever had happened in this house, it had not happened that day. It had not happened that week. The deputies moved through the rest of the home and found nothing else out of place. No shattered glass, no overturned furniture, no signs of a struggle in any room. The house of one of America's most famous actors was calm, orderly, and utterly silent, except for the 2 dogs still wandering through it. Everything about the scene said peace, and everything about the 2 bodies said otherwise. First theories. The Santa Fe County Sheriff said publicly what everyone at the scene was already thinking. The circumstances were suspicious enough to warrant a full investigation. 2 people dead in different rooms of the same house, a dead animal, an open door, scattered medication, and no obvious explanation connecting any of it. The first theory was the one you would have reached for too. When a couple and a pet are found dead together with no signs of violence, investigators think of carbon monoxide, the invisible gas that kills quietly and leaves no marks. It would have explained everything in a single stroke. The tests came back negative. Both Hackman and Arakawa showed no carbon monoxide in their systems. The gas company then swept the entire property, checking every line and every appliance. They found one minuscule leak at a stove burner, an amount so small it could never have harmed anyone. Another theory gone. The scattered pills seemed like the next answer. But the medication turned out to be a thyroid prescription, and toxicology found nothing in Arakawa's system that could explain her death. There was no trauma on either body. Nothing in the house had been stolen. There was no note, no sign of an intruder, no indication that anyone else had been inside at all. Within days, every simple explanation had collapsed. What remained was a house that refused to tell a coherent story. A husband and wife, dead in separate rooms, and mounting evidence that they had not even died at the same time. If stories like this matter to you, take 1 second and subscribe right now. Because what investigators uncovered next is the part of this case almost nobody saw coming, and it changes everything you think you know so far. That last part was the piece investigators could not get past. Decomposition does not lie, and the 2 bodies were not telling the same story. The condition of Arakawa's body suggested she had been dead considerably longer than her husband. And if she died first, you run straight into the question that broke every early theory. Why did Gene Hackman never call for help? Why did he not call 911, or a doctor, or his family, or anyone at all? The man was famous, wealthy, and surrounded by every resource money can buy. A phone sat within reach in nearly every room of that house. The obvious answers made no sense, and the true answer, when it finally emerged, would be sadder than anything the early theories imagined. The medical investigators needed a way to rebuild a timeline inside a home where no one had been alive to witness anything, and they found one, in the last place most people would think to look, inside Gene Hackman's chest. The timeline. Hackman had a pacemaker, implanted years earlier to manage his failing heart. Like all modern pacemakers, it kept a record. When examiners pulled the data, they found the device had logged activity through February 17th, followed by an abnormal rhythm on February 18th, which the chief medical examiner believed was likely the day he died. You read that right. Gene Hackman had been dead for more than a week before anyone found him. A week in which the lights of Santa Fe glittered a few miles away, mail arrived, and the world assumed the reclusive legend was simply doing what he had always done, living quietly behind his walls. And the timeline for his wife turned out to be even more unsettling. Investigators traced Betsy Arakawa's final movements through security footage and receipts. On February 11th, she ran errands around Santa Fe, a grocery store, a pharmacy, a pet food store. A camera recorded her returning through the neighborhood gate a little after 5 in the evening. After that, her trail went quiet, and the initial estimate placed her death on the 11th. Then her phone records surfaced, and the timeline shifted. On the morning of February 12th, 3 calls went out from her phone to a concierge medical clinic in Santa Fe. 3 calls in a single morning is not casual. That is someone who feels something going wrong and is trying, quietly, to get ahead of it before it becomes an emergency. That afternoon, the clinic called back. The phone rang in a house where no one would ever answer it again. So, she was alive on the morning of the 12th, and she appeared to be seeking medical help. Her computer history showed why. In her final days, she had been searching for information about flu-like symptoms, about breathing techniques, about whether COVID could cause dizziness and nosebleeds. In one of her last messages, she reportedly told an acquaintance that Gene had woken up with cold-like symptoms and that she would need to reschedule plans. She believed someone in that house was coming down with the flu. What was actually moving through her body was something far rarer and far more lethal. And in a closet nearby, a dog named Zinna waited in her crate. The silent killer. When the autopsy results came back, they stunned even veteran investigators. Betsy Arakawa had died of hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, a disease so uncommon that most Americans have never heard of it, and so dangerous that roughly 4 in 10 people who develop it do not survive. Hantavirus is carried by deer mice. You do not get it from a bite, you get it from the air, by breathing in microscopic particles from rodent droppings, urine, or nesting material, often while sweeping a garage or opening a shed that has been closed for months. New Mexico sits in the region with some of the highest case numbers in the United States. The virus has a dark history in this exact part of the country. In 1993, a mysterious outbreak in the Four Corners region killed young, healthy people with terrifying speed before scientists identified the culprit. A previously unrecognized hantavirus carried by an exploding deer mouse population. Cases remain rare, a handful in New Mexico in a typical year, which is precisely what makes the disease so dangerous. Almost no one, including many physicians, thinks of it first. The disease is a trap, and it is built out of symptoms you would ignore. It can incubate quietly for 1 to 8 weeks. When it emerges, it looks like the flu. Fever, aches, fatigue, exactly the kind of illness a healthy 65-year-old woman would expect to ride out at home. Then, sometimes within hours, the lungs begin to fill with fluid. There is no cure and no specific treatment, only hospital support, and only if the patient gets there in time. Arakawa never got there. The evidence suggests she collapsed in that bathroom on February 12th, likely within hours of her calls to the clinic. The scattered pills, investigators came to believe, may simply have been knocked from the counter as she fell. An environmental team later swept the property to find the source. The main house came back clean, But across 8 detached structures, garages, sheds, and guest buildings, they found rodent droppings, nests, and dead mice. Somewhere in one of those ordinary spaces, doing something ordinary, she had breathed in the thing that killed her. She had spent her final days worried about her husband's health. She never understood that she was the one running out of time. And her death set in motion the part of this story that investigators still struggle to talk about. 7 days alone, Gene Hackman tested negative for hantavirus. His autopsy told a different story. He died of severe heart disease, with advanced Alzheimer's disease listed as a significant contributing factor. And it was the Alzheimer's that transformed this case from a tragedy into something almost beyond comprehension. The chief medical examiner offered a careful, devastating assessment. Given how advanced his condition was, it is entirely possible that Gene Hackman never understood his wife was dead. Consider what that means. From roughly February 12th to February 18th, one of the most celebrated actors of the 20th century was alone in that house. A 95-year-old man with failing memory, moving through familiar rooms while the person who structured every hour of his life lay in a bathroom he may or may not have entered. He never called anyone. Whether he could not or whether he no longer understood that he needed to, no one can say. The examination suggested he had eaten little or nothing near the end, though he showed no clear signs of dehydration, which raises the quiet possibility that some part of him was still managing, still drinking water, still moving through the routines his body remembered even as his mind let go of everything else. His heart was in terrible condition, damaged by years of disease, and examiners concluded it could have failed at any moment, even without the unimaginable stress of those days. Investigators can only guess at the rest. What is known is where they ended. He collapsed in the mudroom near the back of the house, cane at his side, sunglasses nearby, possibly on his way toward the door. And the timeline explains the detail that haunted the first deputies on scene. Zinna, the Kelpie mix in the crate, had recently come home from a medical procedure and was crated to recover. Arakawa was the one who cared for the animals. When she died, no one let Zinna out. The dog died of dehydration and starvation in the days that followed, while the 2 uncrated dogs survived. One of them was still keeping watch near Arakawa when help finally came. 2 people and an animal gone, in a house behind walls and gates, and the world went on for 2 full weeks without noticing. Now, ask yourself the question the deputies couldn't shake. Unanswered questions. How does a 2-time Oscar winner, one of the most recognizable faces in the history of American film, die without a single person checking on him for 14 days? To understand it, you have to understand how they lived. Hackman had walked away from Hollywood 2 decades earlier and never looked back. After his final film in 2004, he simply stopped. No farewell tour, no comeback, no lifetime achievement circuit. He gave almost no interviews. He painted, he wrote novels with quiet discipline, and he stayed home. He and Arakawa had been together since the 1980s and married since 1991. And they built a life in Santa Fe deliberately far from the industry that made him famous. Locals occasionally spotted him at a restaurant or a hardware store, and mostly respectfully left him alone. Betsy Arakawa was more than his wife. She was, by nearly every account, his entire connection to the outside world. She managed the calls, the errands, the appointments, the household, and increasingly as his memory failed, she managed him. The couple had structured their lives so that no one needed to come to the house. There was no live-in staff, family lived out of state, and the neighbors kept behind their own walls in a community designed around the promise of being left alone. It was a system built for privacy, and it worked exactly as designed. When Arakawa died, every safeguard around Gene Hackman died in the same moment, because she was every safeguard. Even after the medical questions were answered, the case refused to close quietly. The Hackman estate went to court to block the release of investigation records, arguing the family's privacy outweighed public curiosity, and a judge ultimately allowed the records out only with images of the bodies withheld. Then there is the fortune itself, reported to be worth somewhere around $80 million. Hackman's will, drafted years earlier, reportedly left everything to Betsy. But Betsy died first, by 6 days, a sequence almost no estate plan anticipates, and one that legal experts say created genuinely rare questions about where everything goes. And beneath the legal questions sit the human ones that no court can answer. What did he do during those 6 days? Did he try to seek help in ways no camera recorded? Why was the front door open? Investigators reconstructed what the evidence allowed. The rest belongs to a stretch of time that no living person witnessed. And it is exactly that silence that keeps pulling people back to this case. The final mystery. Here is what stays with the people who worked this case. There was no villain, no intruder, no poison, no conspiracy. Every strange detail, the open door, the scattered pills, the dog in the crate, the 2-week silence, eventually resolved into something worse than a crime. A cascade of ordinary events, each one survivable on its own, aligning into a perfect and quiet catastrophe. A rare virus carried on dust. A devoted wife who thought she had the flu. A brilliant man whose mind could no longer sound the alarm. A house built to keep the world out, keeping it out at the exact moment the world was needed most. Gene Hackman spent 30 years refusing fame, and in the end, he became invisible so completely that his death went unseen for over a week. The man who gave us Popeye Doyle and Little Bill Daggett, who won 2 Academy Awards and walked away at the top, spent his final days unwitnessed, in silence, beside the person he loved. Investigators closed the medical file, but what they are still searching for, what draws researchers, doctors, and journalists back to this case, is the shape of those missing days, the hours between February 12th and February 18th that no one will ever fully reconstruct. Public health officials still study the case for what it reveals about a virus most people have never heard of. Elder care experts point to it as the clearest warning in a generation about what isolation can do, even to the wealthy, even to the loved. And the deeper question keeps surfacing. How many other doors like that, one are closed right now, with someone alone behind them? Some mysteries end with an arrest or a lab report. This one ends with silence and the uneasy knowledge that it could happen again, to anyone isolated enough, behind any door, quiet enough. That is what still has investigators searching, not for a suspect, but for an answer to a question none of their tools were built to solve. If this story stayed with you the way it stayed with us, subscribe right now, because we go deep into the cases everyone hears about and almost no one actually understands. And leave a comment below. Which detail of this timeline haunts you most? The phone calls that were never answered, or the 6 silent days that followed? We read every response.